Cleaning Up is brought to you by the Liebreich Foundation and the Gilardini Foundation.
Hello, my name is Michael Liebreich and this is Cleaning Up. My guest today is Beverley Gower-Jones. She's the managing partner of the Clean Growth Fund. That's a £40 million public-private venture capital fund looking to raise money and close a full £100 million by the end of this year. She's also the CEO of Carbon Limiting Technologies. That's a consulting company she set up in 2006 to help companies in the low carbon economy to accelerate their growth. She graduated as a geologist and spent the first 17 years of her career at Shell, but moving into corporate venturing. So she understands not just how to finance companies, but also how to grow them. And she's helped an enormous number of companies and entrepreneurs to do just that throughout the years. Please welcome Beverley Gower-Jones. So Beverley, welcome to Cleaning Up. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Michael. It's lovely to be here.
And where is here this evening?
Oh, here this evening is Hampshire, in lockdown number 4, I think we're on, at home.
Oh, don't. You know, I used to, when people talked about the lockdown, I used to get a laugh by calling it, oh, lockdown 1, you mean? And of course, we're now on 3 or 4. But thanks for taking the time to talk to me here today. For the viewers and listeners, they should know that I am on the advisory, what do we call it? The advisory board, the advisory group for your Clean Growth Fund. And we've got a meeting tomorrow. So some of the things that we'll talk about maybe as also deals or initiatives that we'll talk about tomorrow. But give a thumbnail sketch of the Clean Growth Fund. Let's start there. What is it? What are you doing with it?
Okay, so it's a £40 million venture capital fund to invest in low carbon and clean technology companies with their primary activity and business based in the UK. It's £40 million at the moment. I'm looking to increase that to 100 million over the course of this year. And it's looking at investing in things that can make a material difference to our greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, to enable us and support the move to net zero by 2050.
Okay, so it's a classical venture capital fund in structure, but it has got governmental, BEIS has supported it, correct?
Yes, so the 2 cornerstone LP investors are the UK government, BEIS, with £20 million commitment, and CCLA, who are an institutional investor for charities and church, with also a £20 million commitment. And I'm now talking to other LPs to increase that fund size to 100 million.
So you've done your first close at 40 million and looking to get that to 100 million during the course of the year. Let's come on to what sorts of technologies you like the look of and that you're targeting. But just in terms of the process, how long did it take to get that all lined up so far?
Well, it took a long time. So initially, when I founded Carbon Limiting Technologies with 3 others in 2006, we had a strategy meeting in a caravan in my garden because my house was being renovated at the time. And one of the things we said is that, a core plank of the business would be a venture capital fund. So it wasn't something that kind of just woke up and did one day. We started to build track record by working in the clean tech space. We've worked with over 350 companies now, because building track record is absolutely fundamental to be able to show that you can identify the right types of companies, and you can managing the portfolio is critical, so that you can really manage the acceleration and the growth of those companies. I really started in earnest 5 years ago. I found that when I was supporting companies, I came across the same thing again and again. Right, they struggled.
Just to clarify then, so Carbon Limiting Technologies is your consulting company, which you started in 2006. And it was helping build companies, really actively coaching, supporting, growth hacking, and so on. And that was the first stage, was to do a bunch of that and then to raise the venture fund. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yes, yes. So I'm a
Right.
geologist by background, not a financier. And so I started building track record in the space through carbon limiting technologies, through the consulting side, and actually working with companies to grow them. 5 years, as I was doing that, I found kind of over and over again that they really struggled to get investment finance, particularly in that first commercial demonstrator type phase. And I kept looking around for other, for funds to appear, and they weren't really. So I decided, kind of about 5 years ago, that I'd do it myself. I found an advisor in George Whitehead from who was Octopus at the time, and started to do all the things that you need to do to put a fund in place. So, I went to number 10, I went to the Cabinet Office, I spoke to a lot of private institutional investors, the Committee on Climate Change, House of Lords, Bank of England, and just literally spoke to everybody to garner the enthusiasm and kind of share the case.
Including, I mean, that wasn't your only advisor, because that was around the time that, you and I met. You were judging the Shell Springboard Technology Awards, and we're talking about now, it's got to be more than 10 years ago. And I think you were talking about, eventually raising a fund, and then you asked me to be an advisor, probably, as you say, probably 5 years ago. And
Yeah.
it's been, I guess the point here is, it's been a bit of a long road, hasn't it?
It has been a long road, but I think quite often the things that are worth doing can take a long time to do. It's we're here now, and I think that's it's really important for the entrepreneurs who are looking to have their businesses funded. It's been an exciting road too. So it's had its ups and downs. People have held the tissue box with me on more than one occasion, but there's also been the excitement of of doing and going down that journey.
But I mean, it's a completely different world this last year or two, not just for yourself because you closed the fund and you now get to invest, but also just the environment. I mean, everything, the focus on climate, the availability of technologies, and the seriousness of the entrepreneurs. I mean, my impression certainly is that this is just chalk and cheese.
It is. I mean, 2019, I think, was a massive wake-up call for society in general. The hottest temperatures on record, ppm of carbon going through the roof, a lot of the wildfires that we saw, and all the kind of weather impacts with flooding and so on, really becoming hugely visual and very it really changed everything. That 2019 piece, people started to take it much more seriously. I think now every board of every major company, climate change is kind of top of the agenda, whereas 10, 15 years ago, it wasn't, it just wasn't even mentioned. And actually we would be telling our entrepreneurs to base their business cases on value efficiency or cost saving, or
don't mention the climate.
Don't mention carbon or climate. But
right.
Now it's, for the fund, it's the top thing we ask for. They have to fill in a climate assessment report. So things have just changed beyond recognition.
Are you worried? I mean, you've got your fund now, the first 40 million, and you're starting to invest. Are you worried about the point we're at in the cycle? I mean, it's kind of a nice way of saying, are we in a bubble, and are you going to be investing at the top of it, and are you going to have trouble producing good returns?
I don't think so. I think the timing for it is perfect. I think this next 10 years is absolutely pivotal in all the key sectors that we look at. So in the building sector, the transport sector, industry, waste, power. It's a really kind of fundamental time when things are really going to decarbonize hugely by 2030. Hopefully a price on carbon will come. I know there's going to be a new UK emissions trading standard, and I think the timing is absolutely perfect.
And you don't worry that already gets priced into the investments that you're going to make. In other words, everybody agrees with you, and therefore, just two college grads with a piece of paper suddenly go running around thinking that they're worth, umpteen millions before they've done anything.
This is it's an interesting point, Michael, and I kind of I understand it and take it, but our hypothesis when we set the fund up is there wasn't enough investment at this first of a kind demonstrator product market fit, and kind of in testament to that, in the first 2 months of having the fund open, we had over £500 million worth of deal flow, and that's from the companies that we had the request for. So I don't, sadly in a way, depending on which hat you're wearing, I don't see that.
So you've made the first investment. This I know before our board meeting tomorrow. You've made the first investment in a company called Piccolo. Do you want to talk through why Piccolo, the background of that investment? And because not everybody will know either the investment process nor the company.
Sure. So the process is quite long. We like to invest in companies that we know and have built relationships with. I think that's a key part, because we're going to be with those management teams for a long time, helping them build those businesses. Piccolo is a flexible trading platform for trading flexibility for the power system. So I've known James Johnson and the team for probably about 6 years, because they've received grant funding through some of the companies we've supported through the grant funding that they've received. They've done the largest auction for flexible trading in the UK. £14 million was traded for UK power networks, and they're now expanding internationally and building and growing that business. Clean Growth Fund invested because we like the team. They've been together a long time, chaired by Volker Beckers. We can see huge market potential in the next 5 years for the technology. If we're really going to bring the number of heat pumps and the number of electric vehicles onto the grid that is talked about in the energy white paper and so on, then we absolutely have to have way much more trading of demand and supply than we have at the moment. And so that's key. And so those kind of things combined together.
As we speak, the UK market is pretty tight, isn't it? There's all the heat pumps are going. There's this cold weather, so there's high demand for gas, for electricity, and you've got the old coal-fired power stations even are running, which they don't normally do. So is Piccolo doing well this week?
I believe so. I think they're working extra hard, and I think we'll see more of that to come.
Because that's the role they play. I mean, they're helping to sort of square the circle between variable renewables and demand, right?
Yeah. So they demand response, or they actually the thing they have is they have the platform, the software platform, which enables distribution network operators to put their requirements on the platform, and it enables aggregators or people with load to put their assets on the platform, and then they can they run and manage the auctions between those two sets of parties. So they're a kind of an enabler, a facilitator in ensuring that we can actually manage our demand to meet the supply that's available.
And did you lead the round?
Yes, absolutely, we did. One of the things that mandates that the Clean Growth Fund has is to lead rounds into investments, to encourage co-investors and others that are interested in investing in low carbon or clean technologies, but maybe haven't done it before, or maybe want to, partner with and co-invest with someone. And so we see that as a core part of our role.
And so the mandate, and that's presumably why Bayes supported it, is to try and get some private money in at the level of the fund, and then some co-investors as well. So you've got sort of two multipliers there.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you bring any in on the Piccolo deal? Did you bring in some co-investors?
So the Piccolo deal, we're talking still with a number of very interesting co-investors. So we tranched the money in 2 tranches, and the round is still open.
Okay.
So we're hopeful to be able to announce a strategic corporate investor in the next couple of months. But sometimes I think, and another reason the fund invested in Piccolo is that you really have to understand the power market. You really have to have that deep sector knowledge to be able to make that choice and make that investment. And I think that's one of the things that the fund brings, is that kind of knowledge and understanding. So we were confident and able to make that where other funders, were maybe not so sure.
Yeah, very good. What are some other areas? Because you've got this area of flexibility and the grid. What are the other areas that you're looking at? Because you've got 500 million of deal flow. Maybe you just say, well, we just sort of sit here and the deals come to us. We don't have to be strategic. But I know that that's not the case, right? I'm aware that you're thinking quite kind of carefully about the places where you can play. What are those places?
So in terms of the process, Michael, what we do is we create what we call landscape maps. And I know you've seen the demand response landscape map that we've produced. And so then we look at each area strategically. We look and we understand what the regulatory environment, what the drivers are. We look at what the kind of market situation is, who the competition is, and we kind of map out as far as we and as much as we can the dynamics and what we think is happening in a particular sector or a particular space. One of the things I would say, because of course on our website, for example, you'll see that we talk about the 5 key sectors, which roughly make up 20% of emissions each. So that's power, buildings, transport, waste, and industry. We're finding a lot of innovation in the gaps, if I can call it that. So industries aren't siloed anymore. If you look at the transport sector and the power sector, for example, and then you look at vehicle to grid, you can store, of course, energy in the car battery. And so therefore, those 2 industries aren't discrete. If you look at buildings and power, for example, then people that were just consumers of electricity are now producers. And so you have prosumers. And so there's a lot of innovation kind of in these gaps. I mean, if I talk about a different sector, if we look at food and drink, and then we look at chemicals, no longer do we need to throw our biomass waste away. We can take that biomass waste and we can use that to produce alternative fuels or chemicals. And so then we see a real link up with the chemical sector and the food and drink industry, which are all completely new value chains, completely new supply chains. And what's interesting in those is that the way value is going to be created is different, and who is going to capture that value is unknown. And so with change comes opportunity. Also comes a certain amount of uncertainty, of course. And those are the kind of real areas where we're exploring, quite deeply.
That very much resonates what you're talking about, the new value chains, because I got to be honest, when I first heard the word circular economy, I thought, well, not really. It's just, that's just, fanciful, and, there's recycling, and why can't they just call it recycling and so on. Recently, I was talking to somebody who was, building a business around glass fiber recycling, wind turbine blades and other sources of glass fiber. And I was thinking that the whole business would be, all these manufacturers they've all got a problem because they've got this waste and they're not allowed to put it in landfill, and there's just getting more and more and more of it. And so the fundamental sort of mainspring of the business, I thought, was solving someone's waste problem. And this entrepreneur said, no, this is a fantastic raw material. We can do this with it and we can do that with it. And the value chains don't exist yet, but it's the most amazing, resource. And not only is it free, people pay us for this incredibly valuable thing that we can do these marvel. And I just thought, okay, we're in a different world here. This is really interesting.
It is. I wonder what's going to happen with those waste sources that are currently free when the people that generate them realize they can actually, they're valuable to someone.
Well, the economics flip. Historically, what happens is the thing that you used to pay people to take away, you now, auction to the highest bidder. And that's incredibly healthy. It's incredibly healthy when a waste stream becomes valuable.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely it is.
And we've seen there, this has happened in other industries and other sectors. So it's a real thing that should happen.
I agree. Completely. And I think it's those types of things, re-understanding business models and so on, which just make it really fascinating.
But Piccolo is a software company. I mean, it's not an asset heavy company, but a lot of the areas that you're looking at, there are assets involved. Sometimes it's very asset intensive, and that would be whether it is something in the circular economy or the agriculture, the food industry, energy industry, transport industry. And I think this has been maybe this is part of the genesis of the fund. But that kind of valley of death where you can do something in the lab and it makes sense and it's definitely should be part of some future industrial ecosystem, but nobody wants to put in the asset finance. Everybody wants to do the asset light models. Yeah.
So part of the conversation earlier about the first of a kind demonstrator thing is to recognize that I want to do the asset heavy model. So it's engineering solutions. We have some fantastic engineering here in the UK, and trying to get some of that financed is part of what this fund is about. And actually one of the trends that we're seeing is that infrastructure investors, because if, kind of simplistic view, but there's there's an awful lot of infrastructure finance, but there aren't many infrastructure projects. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, there's an awful lot of innovation, entrepreneurs, and there's not very much venture capital or other source of finance to fund those businesses through that, kind of Series A place. And so what we're also seeing is that some of the infrastructure funds are approaching and starting to come earlier because they then get an early view on the pipeline and they can then start to pull things through. So for example, Arden acquired Winetics, which is a kind of an AI piece for looking at traffic flow. Arguably Winetics is a venture capital investment, but actually Arden acquired it because they could see the infrastructure, kind of opportunities of it. And we see much more of that type of movement and activity from the kind of infra funds, either as a part of their fund or the, sorry.
And I want to stop you there just for one reason only, which is that some of our viewers and listeners are not very technical. Maybe because they're earlier in their career, they may not be financial. And I think it's a really critical, you and I can talk about infra funds and we know what we mean. But not everybody does. And, there is, what you're doing is venture capital, but even that can go from sort of asset light, just doing software, just doing, technology, pure technology, to actually businesses that sell things. But then the infrastructure funds, they tend to be, that's all about project, bundles of project finance, where the risks are very different, aren't they? So maybe just elaborate on that if you could.
Sure. So project finance, infrastructure funds typically would look to do project finance. So roll out a large number of projects where the risk is lower and the return is lower and the time period is generally much longer. And so then the capital is recovered through a debt repayment type piece with interest. Whereas a venture capital fund, you invest in a business for equity. So you take shares in the company in exchange for the cash. You sit on the board, and you coach and you work with the company to help it grow, to a point where you can exit it. And when you exit it, you sell it to an acquirer or you put it on the IPO. And then, by doing that, you get your capital back plus some, hopefully, to be able to, repay the people, the LPs that gave you the money in the first place.
The LP, the limited partners, that's the people with the money. And I mean, the key word that you've used there is risk. And I do worry that, there's a lot of people don't really understand that a lot of the sort of the hard work of finance, what finance does is match a pool of investment, a pool of money to the appropriate risk level. And you can either, you can either get high returns from high risk or low returns from low risk. And the clever bit then is to try to get high returns, but manage the risks down, or to get, to constantly, you're spending as much time thinking about managing risks down as getting returns up, aren't you?
Yes. I mean, a lot of it is about that risk management activity and understanding what that is at the beginning, and knowing what the plans are for mitigating or managing that risk to enable the growth of the company through sales and so on.
Right, and you're doing that by sitting on the board and coaching. You try and reduce the risk effectively.
We do that in a number of ways, actually. So part of that will be in conditions in terms of putting the money in the first place, in terms of
clever structuring of the finance as well. Yeah,
and the team is there, and there's a 100-day plan, and all the kind of things that you want to kind of assure yourself of before actually proceeding with the investment, and there's quite a lot of work in that. And then in terms of working with the companies, one of the things the Clean Growth Fund has done is it's put a services agreement in place with Carbon Limiting Technologies, which is a consulting company, so that we can work with the venture partners and associates at CLT to drive that commercialization of the business. So we can work with the companies to not just to on the board, but actually much more.
Okay, so you have a sort of talent pool that you can draw on if somebody needs a marketing plan or needs a sales force remuneration structure created and stuff like that.
Yes, or to work out value proposition for a new product, or to find a strategic partner, whatever it might be.
It's very cool, and I will say, I'm delighted to be involved in my little tiny way, because I do think that there is an insufficient emphasis in all of this on the sheer mechanics of building a business. We can all talk about climate, we can all talk about high tech, we can talk about policy, but at some point you have to hire a sales director, and you have to put you have to price a product, and you have to deal with returns, and there's all sorts of basics, and it's very easy for those to get lost, and for good companies to fail for lack of just the sort of the day-to-day mechanics of building a business.
Yeah, traditionally, if you look at any product, let's take the mobile phone, it typically takes 30 years for mass market adoption from innovation through. And of course, as you know, with climate change, that's time we don't have. Right. We need to do this in 10 years. So we've got to find a way of speeding everything up. And we've never had to do that before. So I kind of call it coevolution, but it's about working with the supply chain, with the finance, with the regulation, with the standards, with the innovators, to kind of make everything happen, 3 times faster.
Is that coevolution? Is that short for coercive evolution? Because you force them to go faster.
It could be.
Yeah.
I haven't got selectors on, so it's fine.
Right. Okay, so this is all the clever stuff, and hopefully that's been of interest to anybody thinking about a career in venture capital or in finance, to try to solve this climate challenge. But 40 million pounds or even 100 million pounds is just a tiny. It's not even a drop in the barrel. If you really in the bucket, if you really think about climate, we're going to have to be investing probably a couple of trillion a year in the solutions. So don't you find that sort of daunting? I mean, how do we solve such a big problem with such small amounts of money?
I think what we have to realize is that you have to have the right tool for the right job. And so to have a venture capital fund that was £1 billion or £1 trillion, you know, for what we're looking to do, investing in Series A companies wouldn't work. So it's not the right sum. So, you know, the right size for a VC fund for what we're looking to do is 100, 150 million. And I think we have to be careful of that. So, you know, the right size for an infrastructure or a project debt financing piece, you know, might be those kind of, you know, orders of magnitude larger than what we're talking about here. I think that's the kind of key thing really to take into consideration and to understand. There is a vast amount of money to mobilize to make this happen. It will come from different places. It will come from governments. It will come from private industry, and from the city, from the finance community, and of course the Green Finance Institute have been really supportive, you know, really behind that. And so I think you know, when I look at that, you know, the 100 million in isolation, I'm absolutely not saying that's the only thing that's needed. But it's the right tool for this job.
Okay, so we're talking about an ecosystem of finance as well as an ecosystem of technologies.
Absolutely.
And you've got that piece, which is those Series A, the sort of the first institutional money that comes in to scale up. What is the single, if you look at the ecosystem around you, what would you like to see, or what single development would help you and your companies, your portfolio companies, accelerate?
I kind of want two wishes, please. So
okay.
In terms of the first one, it's joined up funding. We don't have a joined up funding stream. So from the angel and the grants through to the early stage VC, through to the project finance, and a lot of the companies we're looking at need debt finance as well as venture. And so a more transparent and joined up process, I think, is fundamental. I think probably life sciences, from what I understand, maybe do it slightly better than clean growth at the moment. So
joined up meaning as the company matures, or I mean, where is it failing at the moment?
So if we look at, there's a lot of money goes into grant funding, and a lot of money in and you know, angel investment, angel community networks are quite active, but there's no, if you're for example, if your grant program, you know, isn't called in time, you might have to spend a year or so looking for that money. There's not enough money at the venture space, and one of the roles of the Clean Growth Fund is to waterfall more money in, but we need proportionate amount of venture money for the amount of you know, kind of grant money that's spent. CEOs and entrepreneurs spend you know, months and months looking for and trying to attract finance, whereas they should be delivering on their business plan, and that takes then 3 or 4 years longer, you know, to actually commercialize the technology.
I was very lucky building new energy finance. I mean, it didn't feel lucky at the time. It felt incredibly painful, but I did the first 2 years without raising money. I just couldn't take myself away from the business for long enough to raise external money. And I was lucky because I had a little bit of money and I was able to attract other people into the business who worked for incredibly low salaries and in some cases put money in as well. And I managed to keep the thing going on vapor for, you know, fuel vapor for 2 years, but it was an information business. I wasn't, you know, building widgets, selling widgets, you know, providing life critical services, transportation, energy, and so on. So I was lucky.
Yeah, and my I suppose my second wish is kind of on the other end of the piece, and that is that the institutional investors have asset classes, and they can't just switch money from one type of you know, investment to something different. And so I think to have more what alternatives is the class that clean tech comes under, and so to have more rapid creation of alternative asset classes that are risk taking and can look at illiquid investments would be my second wish.
So this would be things like mezzanine finance and warrants, debt with warrants, and just more creativity around what they can do.
Yes, and exactly. Yeah.
What is the role? As you know, we've clearly got a highly supportive environment from a sort of governmental point of view, setting aside obviously the challenges, the vast economic and social challenges of COVID currently, but there is a real commitment to the net zero target. And I know it's serious because I keep on getting calls from people in the Treasury to talk to them. That's very different from the past few years. But is there anything else? I mean, what's the role of, could the government, for instance, procure e-fuels for different fleets that they control? Maybe some of the, whether it's in the military or or I was going to say post office, but of course that's not government anymore. But within the NHS, are there things that could be done? Could procurement be part of the matrix here?
I think it could be, and I think it's one of the things that is a key trigger, is that scaling up for scaling things up is that volume of supply and that procurement piece. So if we look at something like power to fuels, where we're going to create potentially aviation fuel from from electrolysis and so on, then we need really a buyer supplier alliance. So we need the buyer, British Airways or whoever it is, to commit to buying the fuel that's generated through the process, even though that fuel is going to be more expensive, because then, as the supplier is then able to scale up the process and take cost out of the process, costs will come down, but it de-risks the process for the supplier, because of course it's very difficult to say, well, I'm going to spend whatever it is, 50 million pounds on building this process and hope that someone buys it at the end of the day. And government does procure a lot. I think we were talking earlier about Ministry of Defence and their aviation aircraft fueling needs, and so I think there is a big opportunity there for sure.
Because I must say, I still, there's a big part of me, despite the fact that I enjoy working with you and the Clean Growth Fund, there's a part of me that says I really don't like state investment, sort of venturing, because
we had that conversation.
Exactly, you will have had that conversation with me, because I'm afraid everybody has to, dull though it is. And I'm sort of okay when it's a private sector person like yourself managing it. What I really don't like is when it's the bureaucrats giving out the venture money. But you kind of can avoid that. I mean, because if you have a mandate, a purchase mandate that says, if you can hit a light bulb that does this, or a vehicle that can do this, or a fuel that can do that, or whatever it is, then you know that there is this amount of market guaranteed that you can. It feels much less like picking winners.
I think that's I can see some kind of sense and logic in that. I think where there's a kind of an intervention needed, I think government has a key role to play, and I think that is absolutely true in green finance and the venture space. I don't think that precludes the opportunity for procurement, given of course the public procurement rules in terms of making sure it's a fair process, fair competition, and so on. But there is a big role in that kind of purchasing piece, which would help entrepreneurs with new solutions be able to test them out. And it's one of the reasons we focus quite heavily on partnerships, industry partnerships with entrepreneurs, because not only do you then understand firsthand what the market need is for a solution, because that product market fit is really critical, but you can you can really work with that industry partner to commercialize that solution and then take it to market. They can be that first early adopter and take it to market.
And let me just take a step back in terms of your own sort of career, your own approach to this, because you've been doing that as a consultant, 2006, carbon limiting technologies. You've been helping companies kind of get product market fit, find their first customers, all those sorts of things. Why did you get into this? Did you suddenly in 2006 get terrified about climate change, or did you think, that this is just a good space to build a career? I mean, where are you coming from?
So I'm a geologist by background. I was an avid scuba diver before children, and I think when I was, enjoying that hobby, I could actually see the degradation in the corals and the underwater habitat. Which was, I suppose, kind of like a first awakening. I worked for Shell for 17 years, and I clearly remember having a conversation with my colleagues whether we were going to be the generation known as the generation of polluters or the generation of communication. And I kind of argued, strongly that we were going to be known as the people that polluted the planet. And I guess I thought, well, I really enjoyed technology transfer and commercialization. I was a founder of Shell Technology Ventures, and decided that was the direction I wanted to take my career in.
Shell Technology Ventures, it's just been announced that for 2020 they were the top investor in terms of numbers of deals. So you were there right at the beginning. That was you founded it, or you were a founder?
Yeah, there was a small team of us that co-founded Shell Technology Ventures. It was half Houston based and half Holland based. I had a team in Houston, and I was vice president for drilling and construction, for well construction. That was my area, which was also hardware and asset heavy. And so that was how we started out.
Well, if we had endless time, I would start to ask you about Ever, because I'm an advisor to Ever, where essentially drilling, if they can drill their horizontal wells really fast, then it'll be an amazingly successful solution. And if they can't, then I don't know, presumably less successful. But I just want to, rather than go down that route, I want to sort of finish just talking a little bit about where do you see the next sort of decade panning out? Because, COVID aside, if it wouldn't be for COVID, we'd be sitting here going, right, we're in the first year of a critical decade. This is what we've got to achieve by 2030. That's what we've got to achieve by 2030. Are we going to get there, do you think? And if so, why?
I'm positive that we are going to get there. I think Simon Sharp at Cabinet Office has just published a paper actually looking at tipping points, and is talking that the power and the electric vehicle tipping point is actually much closer than we think it is.
Well, I think power has tipped. I mean, we've still got a lot of pushing and shoving to do, but I thought that power tipped probably. I mean, I guess became convinced of that. I'd always talked about it, but I was convinced in about 2011, 12, and electric vehicles, I was convinced in about, so anyway, those two are the easy ones, are they not?
In the UK, I think absolutely,
right.
From a kind of global perspective,
yeah.
But so I think that's really, really key. I think just the pressure, the public pressure on our to do the right thing is really, really growing. And when we put out, as humanity, when we put our mind to something, it's incredible what we can achieve. So I was heartily relieved in 2019 when climate change rose up the Ipsos Mori poll of things that people were concerned and worried about, and that kind of general recognition from everybody has really kind of given me that kind of sense of positivity to think, yes, we can do this, we can get there. We haven't given ourselves any time, we've actually got to kind of charge ahead, but I do, I think we have to really remain positive on the topic.
And what about, because just coming back to sort of taking the technology, the societal change is clear. The technologies, I do think, power, transport, relatively sort of, clear line of sight. But there are some really tough ones. I mean, heating, aviation, shipping, various industrial sectors. I mean, we get some line of sight on steel, but cement, I'm delighted that you're optimistic, but tell me, come on, infect me with your optimism for those hard sectors.
So I don't have all the answers. I think we have to, the amount of kind of innovation that I see in those different sectors. So I was looking at a business today that was looking at taking carbon dioxide from cement and creating aggregate technologies with it, so mineralization. And just the amount of innovation, is incredible. And so whilst we won't always go down the right road initially, we have to take the steps, learn, and then do something else. So if we look at hydrogen, for example, and I know you've been doing a lot of work on hydrogen, where is it going to be used at the end of the day? Is it going to be used for home heating, or is it going to be used for things that are mobile? Not totally clear or obvious, but if you don't start, then you've got no chance of finding out. Yeah. And so I think that's the key. And I think probably we need some like moonshot type groups to take some of these nutty issues like buildings, heating and cooling, like industry decarbonisation. So I did a lot of work on industry roadmaps, decarbonisation roadmaps to 2050, and really start to do some showcase type demonstrations to actually make those things happen. And if we can do small things rapidly and learn from them quickly, and then learn and do more, that's actually better and more effective than building one big thing and then realizing actually this doesn't work.
I wonder if there's a sort of a grand overall picture that's emerging here that we could paint, which is you sort of need a period of experimentation and learning, and then you need to settle on some solutions, and that maybe that process maybe takes sort of 5 or 10 years, and then you need a couple of decades, because these are huge sectors, incredibly capital intensive. They involve human behaviors, all sorts of things, and it probably takes a couple of decades to sort of grind through and actually get those out there. And that's what I see happening on renewable energies. It's happening on transportation, and but if we don't reach the end of the decade with line of sight on cement, aviation, shipping, glass, ceramics, etc., then we're not going to get there by 2050. So, if you agree with that model, that says your work this decade is pretty damn important, right?
That's right. And if you look at things like the Glass Futures Lab and the glass, in that work is starting, and I think that's what's encouraging. And we need more of those types of things, and it's really encouraging to see the types of innovation that they're looking at deploying in the glass sector.
Well, look, I've known you for over a decade. I've watched you be incredibly determined and persistent and clear-sighted in achieving your goals. I feel like probably if we had this conversation again in 10 years, we'd look back and say, well, that wasn't even base camp. That was a 40 million fund, but it's definitely a huge achievement. So I'll congratulate you again on the closing and on your first investment, and look forward to our advisory board meeting tomorrow and to the future ones that we're going to have.
That's lovely, Michael, and thank you very much. I really enjoyed our chat, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Thank you very much for spending some time with us.
My pleasure.
So that was Beverley Gower-Jones. She's the managing partner of the Clean Growth Fund and CEO of Carbon Limiting Technologies, consulting company that helps companies in the low carbon economy accelerate their growth. My guest next week on Cleaning Up is Fatih Birol. He's the executive director of the International Energy Agency and probably the preeminent energy economist of his time. Please make sure you join me at this time next week for a conversation with Fatih Birol.